You know, I'll make a boat. It might not float, but it'll catch a lot of
Goats?
goats. Welcome back, guys. So, a little bit change of scenery. We actually moved the Solara back into the shop and moved. I don't know if you guys noticed what was in here, but we had the 1941 Jeep. We moved that outside, waiting for parts on that. And since we're kind of full steam ahead on this guy, trying to get ready for Torque or Toyota Fest, we're trying to get deep into it and finish everything as much as possible. The goal right now is to at least get the car quote unquote drivable, at least onto the trailer and then back off the trailer and then park it under its own power. That's the goal right now. The car is definitely not going to be painted. It's not going to be fully done to everything that I want to do to it, but at least drivable so that we can see it at the show. That's the goal right now. But yeah, so we moved the Solara into the shop. Just kind of a little quick update since we kind of been not really recording. We with the holidays we've been having a whole lot of stuff going on. But I have been getting a whole bunch of messages. People asking me how I did the rear end and how I did it to match up into the Solara, what rear end I used. So I decided that I would just kind of do a little quick walk around because a lot of stuff did happen from the last update. So we're just going to do a quick walk around and then kind of talk about how we went ahead and did the rear end of the car. So first starting off, you might see the whole car and you can tell that it's actually been completely stripped out. Glass has been removed, doors have been taken out, everything. This car is ready to pretty much get a cage, which is the goal. We're going to build a cage in the car. Still kind of waiting on that because there's still other stuff I need to complete before I actually do the cage because make sure where the cage needs to go around it. But since the last update, the motor now is fully installed in the car. Nothing holding it. It's officially part of the Solara, so everything's looking good there. As you can tell, the motor does not have a transmission on it, and you can see that this motor is perfectly balanced. Most cars rely on the transmission, otherwise they'll either tilt back or tilt forward. This one is perfectly balanced in the engine bay of the car, which was my goal, as well as centered to the strut towers, which as well was my goal. So we're looking good there. Next over, if you want to kind of walk by this way, you can see the interior been fully stripped out. I am going to go get some dry ice because we do have to remove all of the sound deadening that the car has. I don't know if I'm going to weigh that. We might weigh it. I don't know. But as of right now, everything's been removed. Got to get it ready to start welding it in there and doing the transmission tunnel, but we won't do that until we get the transmission, everything butted up. And then finally coming over to the rear end, which is the main thing that everybody has been asking me since this past weekend or the last month. So, rear end that I used. I asked for a G37 rear end. This is technically a G37 rear end, but it's out of like an 08 G35. If you know about them, you know that that's the year that they moved over to the G37 body style. So the reason I went with this rear end, it's because the upper control arms, the lower control arms, everything mounts to the subframe. So meaning that the subframe essentially it's its own thing. So I don't have to worry about mounting the upper control arms or figuring out the geometry onto the chassis of the car. So really all I had to do was get the subframe, butt it up into the car. The first initial time that I ever threw this rear end in, I was having issues. I was going to just throw it in, but the rear end sat too low, if that makes any sense. Essentially, the car looked like a monster truck and the rear end was like really low and it didn't look right. It didn't sit right with me. So that's why we went ahead and cut everything out. As you can tell, everything from the back seats to the rear end over here. Reason for this was so that the subframe can sit up into the chassis as much as possible until a point I felt happy with it. So once we reached a good spot, did a whole bunch of measuring to get the center line of the chassis and the rear subframe, as well as the center line of the wheel in the wheel well. So if you want to take a look at that, so you can see that the rim itself is perfectly centered in the wheel well. So that was a goal as well as also, you know, from side to side. So once we figured all that out, we went ahead and kind of dropped it into place, made sure it didn't move. I used a whole bunch of ratchet straps. And then once that was done, I marked all the locations. So pretty much the rear subframe has 4 bolt locations, which is these big round bushing parts. This one, that one, and then over there and there. Once that was done, I went ahead and I built a bracket out, and then I boxed it in. So in here, there's a nut welded in, boxed in, and then I added these chromoly tubings across to kind of reinforce it from both sides. So that's pretty much how I bolted it in. And then eventually over time, I want this car to sit nice and low. So I did actually cut what would be considered the frame of this car, basically doing a C-notch. But I might change a few things because if you guys follow me on Instagram and seen my last post, I'm actually planning on doing a cantilever setup. Cantilever setup, close this for now. A cantilever setup is essentially where instead of having what a true tradition, which would be the shock mounted onto the knuckle, the shocks will actually be placed in a horizontal manner and will be working off of a cantilever setup, which a cantilever setup, this is a rough sketch of what things will be. This is not exactly what it's going to be, but a cantilever setup essentially is going to be a rough triangle shape, 3 mounting points on each corner. The main bottom one mounts straight to the chassis of the car, while one end, which is going to be the unloading of the pressure, which essentially would be the knuckle. So the knuckle will have a rod going straight up to this. It coming up, trying to unload the pressure and rebound, is going to go here, and it's going to translate to this center point, which again, cantilever. This is what a cantilever is. So now, while this is mounted straight, the pressure comes up. Now, all the weight from here is translating this way, and this piece is actually going to be bolted onto the coilover, and that's how the coilover is going to rebound and work. Initially, I was going to install the coilovers in the trunk, but after just playing around and messing around, we kind of played with the idea of wanting to do the cantilever setup in the back, just like this, right behind the window, which I think would be a very unique and interesting look. A lot of people have started doing cantilever setups. Many of them are visible from the trunk, and very few people actually do this right behind the window. And in my case, this would actually make things a little bit easier. So this is going to be the goal as far as for the suspension for the rear end of the car. But for right now, I need to wait on a few parts for that, because these are actually not my coilovers. These are my buddies of mine that they're for his truck. So I asked him if he can let me borrow it just so I can kind of play with some ideas, and finally figured it out. I am going to be contacting QA1, which is actually the company that makes this coilover, and I was told that they have excellent customer service and that they will build you a custom set of coilovers as far as length, spring rates, everything, whatever you need. They will help you out and give you the information of what you need. So I am going to be contacting them to get a custom set of coilovers for this car. But yeah, that's pretty much the rear end. Everybody has been asking me, do you have to cut out a lot of stuff? Look, at the end of the day, you can put the rear end in the car however you want. I cut everything out because I wanted everything to sit properly into the shell of the car. So that's why you see a big, huge gaping hole. But at the end of the day, I'm not planning on running back seats. Everything is going to be deleted back here, caged, so it's not a huge deal for me. But that is why I went ahead and used the G35 rear end, is because everything bolts to the subframe, and that's pretty much how I mounted it, for everybody that was curious. For today, we're probably going to just be cleaning up a few stuff. I'll probably be showing you guys how I mounted the TRD BBK brakes on the Toyota Solara knuckles. And then the main focus would be mounting up the rack and pinion The wreck and pinion is a huge goal of mine because that's what's been tardying this entire build, what's been making me extremely delayed. So we're going to play around with that, and then we'll get back to you guys.